'Cause you make me feel, you make me feel, you make me feel like a natural woman.
What's up? Let's try it again. What's up, everybody? Griff here again. Today I'm going to be going through this entire process of creating Aretha Franklin in Adobe Illustrator and then cranking that right into Adobe Character Animator so I can go ahead and do like a tribute to this amazing woman. To be honest, I'm a little bit intimidated because I mean she is such a powerful figure and I really don't want to I want to make sure I do her justice, you know. I have a lot of video from a stream that I just did. I'm going to be compressing down some of the drawing parts, you know, speeding that up so you can see my process. But I also want to dive into the file and just talk a little bit about how I set up a character in Adobe Illustrator for Character Animator. Just go to Start and you'll see a variety of puppets there. You can also check out Dave Werner. He goes by the name OK Samurai, and he's got a lot of puppets you can download as well. And if you want to, you can go to Media Resonate, where we have our free stuff section, and you can grab PewDiePie, Edgar, or Vanoss. Cool, so without further ado, let's just jump in and walk through this process. Hello? Hello? Is this thing live? I'm Mini Griff. And Griff sent me out because he's still getting ready. Takes him forever sometimes to get ready. All right, let me start getting you psyched up here. Let's see. If you're excited for this, make some noise. Okay, so here's my character in Adobe Illustrator. Now the important thing I want to get at is the layers. And I hope you can see these all right. But the way this is broken down is I have a main layer, and that's called Aretha, and that has a head and a body layer underneath it. The body layer is split up so that we have a right arm, a left arm, and then all the background stuff. That includes like the shawl she's wearing, her dress, and so on. If I were to hide that background layer, you can see then you have your left arm and your right arm, and she's got her little microphone here. And then if we dive into the arm layers, we have a bunch of paths right now because I haven't collapsed any of this stuff. But that's just going to be like, this pink area here on her jacket, some of the shading, the line work, that kind of stuff, and then the hand, which is composed of all these paths as well. One note real quick is I like using Illustrator more than Photoshop now. I do my original drawing in Photoshop and I bring that in as a reference because I find it's like more loose to work inside of Photoshop than Illustrator. But I love having the final file in Illustrator because all these paths are easily editable. I can change the colors up. I get nice clean lines, and this whole file is actually way lighter than the stuff I was getting out of Photoshop, so it all runs and loads and reloads faster inside of Adobe Character Animator. So if you're on the fence about that, I mean, that's my opinion at least. So now the right arm, I'm setting up for a triggered animation. I'm going to be using a cycle layer to go through some different hand poses so she can start like this, but then, flare out her hand a little like that. To that end, I have a right hand main layer, and that's this right here, and that's her natural pose. And then we have the right hand, and the right hand consists of several different poses that she's going to cycle through like so. So this is going to be an animation that plays. That's really subtle, huh? Yeah. So I make it really subtle. I like ease into it. It gets a little bigger, and then boom, into the full-blown pose. Now onto the complicated stuff, which is the face. And here is where you can put in a lot of time. And I spent probably the better part of my 5-hour stream last night drawing just the mouth shapes. The head layer is primarily split into a background. And that's all the coloration in the background here. Then I have a jaw, because I want to use the flappy jaw in Character Animator. And this is a tricky one to get, actually. You really got to work at it, and you got to kind of tone down how much jaw you're using, depending on how your character is designed, of course. And then we have our left eyes and our right eyes. And you'll see I painted these onto the background layer here, so that when my eyelids go, I have a similar color behind here, and you never really see any split in the eyelids. So let's just dive into an eye. Now you'll notice I named my right eye plus right eye, and anytime you add a plus in to a layer inside of Illustrator, you're telling Adobe Character Animator that I want this to be an independent layer. And you can mark those with crowns inside of Character Animator, but this is a way just to set it up front. Same thing goes for your right and left eye, or I'm sorry, your right upper and lower eyelids. You want to mark those with pluses as well so they become independent. They don't deform with the group they're in, which is the head. And then your eyelid is just your different paths here. So I've got, the eyelid, and I've got that color I was talking about. Then you got your lower eyelid. You have a blink shape, which is this I was hiding here. And that can get activated when you actually blink in the camera. And then you have your pupil right here, and your right eyeball. And the right eyeball is what's going to define the range that the pupil can move inside of Character Animator. So you can be tricky if you wanted to and have two layers. You could have a layer you call right eyeball, which is completely transparent, just to define a bounding box for your pupil. And then you can have like a right eyeball color layer, which will define that white of your eye. And another note about the eye is that since I have these eyelid layers, what you can do is set up this behavior in Character Animator where it will actually track how open or shut your eyes are. And once it gets to a certain point, then it fires off that blink. And I like that behavior because it makes it a much more subtle transition into blinks. And it also lets me be more expressive with my character by widening and narrowing the eyes. So that's an eye. All right. And then you'll see here I have plus hair, and that is Aretha's hair. Let's just see that one more time. That's kind of kind of frightening. And again, I want this to be independent from the head, so I could add maybe some dangle physics or something. Last I checked, it wasn't working too good, so I might bake it down. But the hair is tricky because you want, especially when you're doing long hair, you will often break this up into layers so that you have some hair that sits in front of the head and some hair that sits behind the head. And you might even need a layer that is attached to the body that goes on the body or in the body group so that it can live behind the body. And then I have her earring here, which I also marked with a plus because I added a little bit of dangle to this. All right, and then you'll notice I have plus nose, and we marked this with a plus because it's going to be affected by parallax in Adobe Character Animator, if you decide to turn that on. And what parallax does is, let's say you don't have any head turns, but you turn your head, it'll slide some of the features around the face to sort of mimic some sort of 3D quality. And I'll show you that once we jump into Character Animator. And then we have the eyebrows. And the eyebrows, again, I can have different states like happy and normal, like so. Or at least I should have maybe called that raised. I don't know how happy she looks there. So I have to create a group here that's plus left eyebrow, just as I did with the hands. And then I can put all my eyebrow shapes under there and trigger those with some keys on my keyboard. And then finally the mouth. And this is where it gets crazy because you have to have all of your phoneme shapes. So here we have her M, her L, S, E, F, O, W, R, I'm a pirate. D, ah, it's like the ah sound, ah. And the default right here. Now let's say you wanted to have different mouths. You can totally do that. What you're gonna wanna do is have like plus mouth happy, plus mouth sad, plus mouth angry, and you'll have all these layers in here, or all these groups in here of different mouths. And then you can trigger those inside of Adobe Character Animator. But it's going to be the same thing as we're going to do with the hands and the eyebrows. So that should give you a good enough idea to go ahead and set that up for yourself. I think I do have some characters that are triggering different mouth shapes. Edgar is one, for instance. So if you want to, you can check that out for more examples. Cool, that's it. Let's hop into Adobe Character Animator and see how I hook all this up. All right, so let's just go here to the rig panel. And we'll see how we set this character up. So the first thing you're going to want to do is import your file. And once you do, you'll end up with this little character symbol here. And if you double click it, it's going to show up in your active puppet panel here. And you'll see there's your Aretha. These are all your layers and everything represented in here. So here you have your head. You'll see here in the tags panel, it should highlight that as head. And if you wanted to do head turns, you would map all your different heads to the head turn views down here. And we have our earring, and you see the earring, I put a dangle handle on it. And these things you'll want to tweak, just go back and forth between the record and rig mode and play around with things until you get something that looks good for you. And here we have the mouth, and that should be tagged as the main mouth. And as we go through all these shapes, you're going to see they'll get highlighted over here. Adobe Character Animator has a default naming convention for all these mouth shapes. And if you name them that way in Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever it is you're using, then when you bring the file in, everything will just get automatically hooked up, which is pretty cool. So I'm usually pretty careful to make sure I use their default naming convention to save time. There's our nose, our right eyebrows. So you just want to make sure all these things are mapped. Generally the eyes will end up being the trickiest thing. So I have my upper lid here, lower lid, blink, pupil, and eyeball. Alright, so then we have our jaw here. And we want to make sure this gets marked as jaw. And then we can set up a new behavior. And this is going to be the nutcracker jaw. And then this is the whole head background group here. And you'll see this little handle that is marking the head, and this is where the pivot of your head is going to be, so that when you're moving in the camera, it'll actually determine where that goes. Then we'll get into the body here. We got our right arm. Just for a talking piece, you don't have to to mark this anywhere as right arm, but if you want to do a walk cycle or something, that's what this body puppet here is for. And then we have our right hand main group and our right hand group. So what I did here is I went into this panel, I created a new swap set, and you'll see here I could drag in the right hand group and the right hand main layer. By clicking on this, you can set right hand main to be the default layer, and then you can set a hotkey for right hand, and in this case I just chose Z to be the thing that triggers this group here full of all these hand shapes. Then with this hand group selected, I went over into here and I created a cycle layer. And there's all kinds of cool options for cycle layer, but what I want is to be able to push a button and she'll just run through this thing, and then when I release it, it'll reverse. So I set this to start when triggered. I go through the layers top to bottom. I'm advancing every 2 frames, so I'm kind of like animating on 2s. I'm only cycling it once. I'm going forward and reverse, so it'll get up to that pose and then reverse the animation to go back. And then I'm holding on that last layer, so if I let go of the trigger, it'll hold there until I press the trigger again. So the way that's going to work now is when I'm animating in Adobe Character Animator, I can press Z and it's going to play that animation. I also set up a swap set for the eyebrows, and what's neat about this is you can actually just grab your eyebrow, and if you bring it in here and drag it, you can create a swap set right here, and it'll go ahead and populate all those layers for you. Now this says right eyebrow, and here I'll just rename this to just eyebrow because it's currently controlling both eyebrows. So I have my happy and my normal. Cool, so those are all of my triggered animations. I have a cycle layer happening for the hand, and then if I go to the body here, you see a bunch of different stuff. And what I did is I set up a breathe, and this is a behavior, so if I select this, it's marked as breathe, but you do also need to create the breathe behavior over here on the body layer. And then we also have some markers to say this is the body, say this is the actual character, the origin of the character, so this will determine sort of where it's placed in your scene overall. And then we'll get into the arms. So we have a right arm, it's got a draggable here, and since I'm keeping this pose the whole time, I'm just gonna have her doing this. Then I put the pivot for that right here, and then I put a little dangle on here just to get some of this cloth moving. I got my draggable handle here, and then I put in one of these sticks with the stick tool. I drag it across here to say that I don't want this to bend in the center here, of the left arm. So there we go, my draggable, it's my left arm pivot. I might move that down just a tad. All right, so let's go over here into the record panel and start doing some animation. All right, we're back. Now I'm just in this little box. I'm in a little circle box right here. Over here in the side, under your properties, you can see all the different properties of this character that you can turn on and off. So let's just look at them briefly. So here we have our dragger handle, and we can turn this on, and that is going to give us access to those draggers we set up. And then we have our eye gaze, and eye gaze can be handled a few different ways. You can use the camera input, which is, you know, for like a live streaming thing, it's pretty cool. I tend to prefer now to use the keyboard input, and that just lets me use my arrow keys to determine when the eyes are going to look. That way I can get some nice darts. I can make sure I time it with the blinks, that kind of thing. Like maybe she looks and then there's a blink, and looks and there's a blink. You can set the smoothing, and that's just going to say, and we'll just turn camera input on for a second here, and that's just going to say how smoothly they transition. Oh yeah. And I tend to keep that kind of low because your eyes rarely do that. They just tend to dart around a good bit. And then you can set up your camera strength, mouse and touch strength, or keyboard strength to determine how much these different inputs affect the eye movement. And then we got our face. There's all kinds of cool stuff in here. So if we turn the face on, all of a sudden I've got control of this character with my very handsomely bearded face. Yes. You make me feel. Wait, I haven't gotten to that part yet. So pose to pose movement, what that does is gives you a snappy animation. If you set this up there in the 50s or 70s somewhere, and then you set your smoothing up to something similar, you'll get this sort of behavior, which is kind of cool, especially if you were doing head turns and you wanted that South Parky, like, I'm looking forward, now I'm looking to the side, you know, kind of thing. She's not going to do it. It's not set up. Smooth. Now, the head position strength, that again, these are just determining how much your movement in this camera is affecting the character. Head scale strength is what's affecting, like, when I move in and out of this. And we could get some really funky stuff if we start pushing this up too much. And then the eyebrow strength. So you see here her eyebrows raising. And if I keep my eyebrows up and I push this, I can see they'll go way up with that motion. Problem is when I go way down. That's actually pretty good. I like eyebrows that are very expressive. So then your eyelid strength, and this is the biggest pain in the butt. And I was talking about this in the stream, but depending on how you shape your eyelids, it can be very difficult to get them to close up nicely. You see, as I start to go down, I might see this little split here in my artwork. It's a real balancing act to try to get all this stuff correct. But, you know, you just tool around with the shapes you're using and you mess around with this eyelid strength, and eventually you'll end up with something that works for you. And then you see when I do a full blink, then that blink shape activates. And then we got our mouth strength. And what that's going to do is, if you see here in the camera, I've got little dots around my mouth, and you can see her mouth sort of expands and bends a little bit to try to keep up with that. If I turn on this nutcracker jaw combined with this mouth strength, you already start to get like a nice little bit of movement in here. And maybe I'll crank this up a little more just so you can see. Camera, flap it. I got the flappy mouth, yeah. Then we have our parallax, and you see with the nose, the eyes, they're all kind of floating around the face a little bit, and that's this parallax strength. And depending on the character, you know, you'll want to edit this. Like this way up here, probably too much for this character, looks weird. I found somewhere down here around 120-ish was, you know, it's there and you can see it, but it's still fairly subtle. Then you have your eyebrow tilt. So when you raise your eyebrows, that's how much they're going to rotate. And I probably don't want to do too much of that here. But there is one for the up and the down. So you can edit those if you want a little more on the down, a little less on the up, or vice versa. Then you have move eyebrows together. So you could try to turn that off. Doesn't this look silly? So you got that, and you can even do the same thing with the blink. You turn off blink eyes together, and you might be able to get a wink then. Next, we're going to turn on lip sync. So lip sync here is gonna do the lip syncing thing, and right now it is. Oh, I got to turn my mic on. Here we go. 'Cause you make me feel. And so when you're live streaming, you could have this going on. You could be editing the, you know, moving the microphone, be like, hey everybody, welcome to my show, yeah. One thing to note, any of these are actually, well, most of these attributes are actually keyable. Cool, so here we have physics, and you'll see some physics happening here on this piece of cloth down here, on the earrings, and you can edit all of that stuff as well. So we can set the gravity a little higher, get a little more dangle out of that, or maybe we don't want, you know, that much more gravity. Maybe we just want to loosen up the stiffness a bit here. You can change the gravity direction. You can turn on the wind, so you get like this push from there, which is certainly not something I want on my character right now. And then you have your transform panel here, and your transform is going to let you move your character around on the stage, right? So you can position it, you can scale the whole thing up and down, you can change the opacity or the rotation of this. Group opacity, I'm pretty sure, like I was seeing that, yeah. So it's just doing the whole thing now. Then we have our triggers. So triggers, here's the fun part. So remember I set up a key for H, and that's broken. Let me fix that real quick. I broke it, I broke it. So I feel like now we're gonna get this. Let's try it again. So that just, you know, changes the curvature of my eyebrows, and they still work. And then I have the hand set up as well. So here you'll see the cycle layers, and she just changes her hand position. It holds in this last position for as long as I hold down my Z key, which is the key I assigned to those cycle layers. All right, everybody, and then here's your breathe, and I set that up in here, and we can see there's breaths per minute, so you can get her like breathing really fast, do 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 do, but we don't want that. Cool. So let's just talk now a little bit about like how I like to animate this stuff. I'm certainly not a master by any means, but I've done it a bunch of times now, and I'm starting to get my own workflow down for what I like to do. So the first thing I did is I brought in my audio, and here I have Aretha Franklin, and this is, I found her singing at the Kennedy Center. She was giving out an award, and it was just her voice. So I didn't have any of the music in the background, and that's what you want for Character Animator. With all that music, the lips are just going to go nuts, and you're not going to get a good result. So this worked pretty well, but I did have to do some editing. But here, let's just take a look at what I've got so far. And this is a first pass where I got my audio file, I imported it into here, I selected Aretha, making sure that the lip sync was turned on. I'm gonna turn my mic off now. And then I went to the timeline, and I hit compute lip sync from audio. And that went ahead and generated all these phonemes or visemes. And then the next thing I did was I did a face pass. So I turned off everything but the face, and then I just did my acting. And so while she was singing, I hit record. I was hitting the poses I wanted. I was trying to get the brows the way I wanted. I got some blinks in there. And then I went in after that, and I did a layer with where I just turned on eye gaze, and I only used the keyboard input so that I could do all my ups and downs and all my looking arounds. Wow, I need more sleep in my life. I did go in and edit these, and if you right click on any one of these, you can actually change it to something else. You can add silence, you can delete one just hitting the delete key, or you can even drag these bars in between them in order to change up the timing a little bit. And so in the end, I ended up with this so far.
'Cause you make me feel, you make me feel, you make me feel like a natural woman.
Wow. I'm actually going to turn the blink together back on, because it looks like she's having a seizure or a stroke. Not what I'm going for. So a lot of these can be, you know, I mean, certainly toggled after you animate them too. So it's not like you're stuck. You can try things out. So the next thing I want to do is animate the arms. And you can do this a bunch of ways. You can hit record, and you can just go and drag your handle all over the place if you want to. I just never have really good results that way. I feel like I just end up with this arm floating around, and it's not good animation. So what I tend to do is I play a bit of this. I'm like, okay. And I say, okay, I want her hand to go from here to like over there when she's like, 'cause you, right? And so I'll come in here, I'll grab the handle, I'll put it where I want it, and hit Control 2. And what that'll do is make a 2-frame take here in the timeline with that pose on it. And then here I'll be like, 'cause you, and I know that I'm gonna want her to do this, and just pull her arm up and out a little bit. Hit Control 2 again. Oops. And actually during this stage, and really with every stage, what I try to do is turn everything off that I'm not using. Otherwise you'll end up with just a bunch of keys in your scene that you don't want. Right there. And there's my 2-frame take. And I'll just drag these out a bit. And then what you get is the ability to blend here. So I can take this, drag it across here, and get some blending. And then that's going to determine like my velocity, right? Like, is that too fast, too slow? And if I feel like it's too fast, then I can just go in here and edit that blending a little bit more. Not too bad. Now this is some of the funkiness of Character Animator, right? It's like you can get arcs and stuff in here. So something I'll often do, because it's not like keyframed animation at all. So I want to try to get that arc. So I might pose this arm up around here, hit Control 2 again, and I'll drag this as sort of an in-between then, something that's going to determine the timing and this in-between pose that this arc I want to try to get. It's not going to be as direct as some things you might be used to animating with, but it is overall pretty fast, which is nice. I mean, this isn't what I do. I'd want to change this interpolation of these keys. Unfortunately, I mean, as far as I know, there's no way to actually do that. So it's a different workflow of just trying to figure out ways to kind of cheat that a little bit. All right, cool. So with the hand movements or the arm movements out of the way, I'm going to go in and just trigger those hand poses and some of the eyebrow poses, and that should finish this thing off. I think that's working pretty good. Fairly fast animation. I'd say about 6 hours of work. I've managed to make the character, set up the character in Adobe Character Animator, and animate it. So now I'm just going to go ahead and render out a ping sequence, take that into After Effects, set up the final shot, render that out, and share it with all of you. Alright, so I'm in After Effects now, and what I've done is I set up 2 different compositions. One is for Instagram, and it's going to be 1920 tall by 1080 wide, and then one is for YouTube, and that's going to be the reverse of that, 1080 wide or 1920 wide, 1080 tall. So I can create a video for each of those platforms. And I'm just going to go ahead and import that image sequence. Now you can actually import an Adobe Character Animator project directly into After Effects. And it's really cool because you can continue to make edits on the Adobe Character Animator project and then see those updates happen here in After Effects. I would just caution you, depending on your computer specs and how big your project is getting, how many characters you have. For that PZP trailer, I ended up having just a lot of stuff. I had like 2 or 3 Character Animator characters imported. I had other After Effects projects imported, just all kinds of stuff. So it got crazy, and I ended up rendering these down to ping sequences to make it more manageable. So I just went ahead and did that here because I don't expect I'm going to edit anything. So when you import this, just make sure you hit ping sequence, grab the first one, go ahead and import, and you'll be able to drag this down here into your scene. And there you go. You got your diva. And then I just made a quick background image. And it's just kind of a rough thing I made. It's sort of some brush strokes, a little bit of effects to kind of fade that out. Just to knock out like the silhouette of her hair. One effect that I want to have happen is when she nears the end of the song, it's like the lights go down, right? She'll fade out. I'm going to try the lighting effect. Alright, so I think something like this might work. We're going to play around with it and see what I can do here. I'm going to go ahead and key the intensity, the edge softness, cone angle. Pretty much it's just going to play through. I'm going to get to the end. I nearly forgot my audio file. That would have made this really boring. So right about here is where I might actually start to kill off the intensity of this. Maybe not just yet. Let's hold it a little longer. So this isn't quite it yet, as you can actually just create a new solid. This is one of my favorite ways to do it. I will put black over top of that, just as big as the composition, and that comes in over top of all this, of course. So then as the lights are dying out right here, I'm gonna have this opacity set to 0, play it through, and then go ahead and crank up the opacity. Okay, so that's that. I'll be able to just take most of this stuff then, actually all of this stuff, and I'll copy it, go to my Instagram and paste it in there, and let me just save this project before it crashes and I freak out. Alright, super cool. So everything's here, my timing's here. The only thing that's really going to be weird is her placement and the background. I should have maybe rendered her out bigger, which I could do. I could go back and render out another image sequence in Character Animator and blow up her size some more. So I'm just going to rotate this background layer. Chicka-chicka-cha. Oh, I see what it is. The lighting effect that I put on her, not extending out beyond the size of the image sequence. All right, fine, I'm doing it. Jeez, they're making it so hard on me. I'll just render out another one. All right, if all goes well, I should just be able to replace this image sequence. I'll just go to replace footage with file and navigate to the right place. So there we go, it replaced that. And boobadoo, that light seems a little bananas now. I just wanted to move the light back a little bit. That seems to get it about where I want it. I was gonna say I wasn't making fun, but I did make a little fun. So now all I gotta do is send both my compositions off to the Adobe Media Encoder, and I'll get those posted up to the internet shortly. Alright, thank you so much again for joining me. I hope you got something useful out of this, and I look forward to seeing you back here again really soon.
'Cause you make me feel, you make me feel, you make me feel like a natural woman.